A 68-year-old man was fired from his security job for being too old and slow. 2 weeks later, he woke at 3 in the morning, coughing blood into his palm, feeling something shift deep inside his chest, something that had no business moving. 45 years had passed since he'd come home from Vietnam. When the doctors at the VA hospital finally cut him open, what they found beneath his ribs wasn't just the bullet fragment they expected. There was something else, something that had been deliberately hidden inside his body during a battlefield surgery in 1969. A secret wrapped in waterproof plastic tucked against his heart, waiting. The discovery would change everything: how his family saw him, how he saw himself, and what the world knew about one August night in the jungle when a young medic made an impossible choice that would echo across 5 decades. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. William Thornton woke every morning at precisely 5:47. Not from an alarm, but from something deeper. A decades-old reflex drilled into him during 13 months in the Central Highlands. He'd dress in the dark, careful not to wake Dorothy, his fingers finding the buttons of his work shirt without needing to see them. The same blue shirt Dorothy ironed every Friday evening, a ritual that had survived 46 years of marriage. The apartment was small but immaculate. Military corners on the bedsheets, no dishes in the sink, shoes aligned by the door. On the living room wall hung their wedding photo from 1970. Bill in his dress uniform, Dorothy in white, both impossibly young. Beside it, a photo of their daughter Rebecca at 8 years old, grinning with missing front teeth. No other pictures, certainly none from Vietnam. Bill moved stiffly in the mornings, favoring his left side. A dull ache lived in his lower back, and beneath his chest, just left of center, was a lump the size of a walnut. He'd noticed it years ago, decades really, but it had always been there, unchanging, so he'd learned to ignore it, the way he ignored the scar on his back, the way he ignored the metal box in the closet that Dorothy had promised never to open. 12 years he'd worked security at Riverside Shopping Center. Employee of the Year in 2019, the plaque gathering dust in a drawer. Last week, Dave Simmons, 35 years old with an MBA and soft hands, had called him into the office. The termination papers were already printed. "We need someone more agile," Dave had said, not meeting Bill's eyes. "Security requires quick response times." The younger guards had looked away when Bill cleaned out his locker. No one mentioned the Purple Heart pin on his uniform collar. No one asked why he'd earned it. Dorothy had been waiting when he got home, cornbread already cooling on the counter. She knew before he said a word. 46 years taught you to read silences. They'd met at a USO dance in 1969, 3 days after Bill landed stateside. She'd been singing along to Sam Cooke's You Send Me when he worked up the courage to approach. He'd proposed 2 months later. Their daughter, Rebecca, hadn't called in 6 months. A cardiologist now, divorced 3 years ago. Bill had said the wrong thing then, something about Thorntons not being quitters. The wall between them had grown taller ever since. The first week after losing his job, Bill applied to 17 positions online: security guard, night watchman, warehouse supervisor. Every rejection email used the same careful language: overqualified or seeking candidates with different experience. Never too old, but he could read between the lines. The tightness in his chest started on day 2. Bill dismissed it as stress. What else could it be? He'd survived worse than unemployment, but by evening, standing up from the couch brought a sharp pain that made him grip the armrest. Dorothy noticed, her eyes asking questions, her mouth didn't. He waved her off. Day 3, the coughing began. Dry at first, just a tickle in his throat that wouldn't clear. Bill spent more time in the garage, claiming he needed to organize his tools. Really, he was hiding. The coughing fits were getting worse, and he didn't want Dorothy worrying over nothing. Day 5, he coughed into a tissue and saw red. Just a spot, barely visible, but unmistakably blood. Bill stared at it for a long moment, then buried the tissue deep in the garage trash. His hand went to the lump on his chest. Had it grown? The skin felt tighter, warmer. He pressed gently and winced. That night, Bill couldn't sleep. He lay in the dark, listening to Dorothy's soft breathing, feeling something shift in his chest with each inhale. Not pain exactly, but presence, like a weight had come loose from its moorings. At 2:17 in the morning, the pain struck like a fist. Bill jolted upright, gasping. It felt like something tearing, moving, burrowing deeper. The sound that came from his throat wasn't a scream. It was rawer than that, animal, and terrified. "It's moving!" The words ripped out of him. "God, it's moving inside!" Dorothy's bedroom light blazed on. She was beside him in seconds, hands on his shoulders. "Bill, what's wrong? What hurts?" "My chest. Something's wrong." He couldn't catch his breath. The pain was unlike anything since that night in the jungle. "I'm calling 911. "No!" His hand caught her wrist. "The insurance. Dot, we can't afford—" "I don't care about the money." Through the thin apartment walls, they heard their neighbor Mrs. Murphy's voice, sharp and annoyed. "Jesus Christ, not again!" 10 minutes later, red and blue lights strobed through the window. Officer Frank Kowalski stood in their doorway, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The light hit Bill's face and he flinched. For half a second he was back in an interrogation room, except they'd called it a debriefing. "Sir, have you been drinking tonight?" Kowalski's tone was professional but skeptical. "No, he hasn't," Dorothy said firmly. "He's in pain, real pain." The officer stepped closer, studying Bill. No smell of alcohol, but the old man's eyes had that look, the 1,000-yard stare Kowalski had seen in his grandfather's eyes before he died. PTSD, probably. Another vet who couldn't let the war go. "Mr. Thornton, maybe you should see someone. A doctor, or—" he paused delicately. "A counselor." Bill's jaw tightened. The implication was clear. This is in your head. After Kowalski left, Dorothy sat beside Bill on the bed. Her voice had the steel he'd only heard a handful of times in 46 years. "We're going to the VA hospital in the morning. I don't want to hear another word about insurance or money or pride. Understood?" Bill stared at his hands. Finally he nodded. At dawn, Dorothy made cornbread, their signal for courage needed. Bill put on his blue shirt. Whatever was coming, they'd face it together. The VA hospital waiting room smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. Bill held number 47 in his hand, watching the electronic board cycle through numbers with agonizing slowness. Now serving 23. Dorothy sat beside him, her hand resting on his knee. A silent anchor. The room was crowded with ghosts. Men in wheelchairs missing legs. Younger veterans with haunted eyes and trigger fingers that never stopped tapping. An old man in a Korean war cap dozed in the corner. Bill recognized the fraternity immediately. They all carried the same weight, visible or not. Then he saw the stare. Across the room, a man with a cane was looking at him with an expression Bill couldn't quite read. Recognition, certainly. But something else underneath. Shock, maybe, like seeing someone risen from the dead. The man stood, crossed the waiting room, and sat down heavily in the empty chair beside Bill. He didn't ask permission. Harold Morrison looked every one of his 72 years. His hair had gone white, his face carved with deep lines, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, knowing. "Thornton." The name came out like a question and an accusation. "Jesus Christ, I thought you didn't make it." Dorothy's hand tightened on Bill's knee. Bill's throat went dry. "Hello, Hal." A long silence stretched between them. Other veterans in the waiting room recognized that particular quality of quiet, the kind that separates men who've seen certain things from those who haven't. "You came home," Hal said finally. "You got out." "So did you." "Yeah, but I wasn't—" Hal stopped himself, glanced at Dorothy, then back at Bill. "You still carrying it?" Bill's hand moved unconsciously to his chest. "Yeah. After all this time?" Hal's voice dropped lower. "Christ, Bill. You should have told them back then." "Now it's too late. Some things are better left buried. That what you tell yourself?" Hal leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "Carter's been in the ground 45 years. What he did for you—" "I know what he did." Bill's jaw clenched. "I think about it every goddamn day." Hal studied him for a long moment. "Hayes made senator. Did you know that? Richard Hayes. Retired last year. Full honors. War hero." The bitterness in his voice could strip paint. Bill's face went very still. He hadn't known, hadn't wanted to know. "He got medals, Bill. We got silence." Hal pushed himself up with his cane. Before walking away, he paused. "You're still carrying it. I mean, really carrying it. Maybe it's time to let it out before it kills you." Dorothy waited until Hal was gone. "Bill, what was that about?" "Old ghosts." His voice was hollow. "Nothing more." But when his number was finally called, Bill's hands were shaking. "Doctor." Sarah Mitchell was young, 32 maybe, with tired eyes and a hurried manner. She barely glanced at Bill as she typed his symptoms into the computer. Chest mass, coughing blood, age 68, probably a lipoma, maybe an abscess. Then she touched the lump. Her fingers stopped moving. She pressed again carefully, feeling the edges, the texture, the heat radiating from the skin. "This doesn't feel right." She wasn't typing anymore. "How long have you had this?" "Long time, years." "And it's recently changed? Gotten larger?" Bill nodded. Dr. Mitchell stood abruptly. "I'm ordering a CT scan, today." "My insurance—" "I'll handle the paperwork. Mr. Thornton, I need to see what's under this tissue." The CT scanner was a white tunnel that swallowed him whole. The machine whirred and clicked, sounds that triggered something deep in Bill's memory. Helicopter rotors, the rhythmic thump that meant extraction or death. He closed his eyes and was 23 again, lying in red mud, someone's hands pressing gauze into his back, a voice saying, "Stay quiet, stay still, I've got you." "Mr. Thornton, you need to remain motionless." He opened his eyes. Not Vietnam, not 1969. He was 68 years old in a hospital in America, and something that should have killed him decades ago was finally making its move. In the imaging room, Dr. Mitchell stared at the screen. Then she picked up the phone and called for Dr. Marcus Webb. Webb arrived within minutes, a barrel-chested man in his late 50s who moved with the calm authority of someone who'd seen everything. He looked at the scans and went very quiet. "Good catch, Sarah." His voice was careful. "Mr. Thornton, we need to talk. You and your wife both." In the consultation room, Webb pulled up the images on a large monitor. Bill could see it clearly. A bright white object lodged near his heart, surrounded by cloudy tissue. "That's a bullet fragment," Webb said. "Approximately 2.5 centimeters. It's been there a long time, decades, I'd guess, but it's moved recently. Right now, it's less than 2 millimeters from your aortic arch." Dorothy's hand found Bill's. "But that's not what concerns me most." Webb zoomed in on another area. "There's something else. Foreign material. It looks like fabric, medical gauze, maybe. And there's something inside it. Something that shouldn't be there." Bill's vision narrowed. After 45 years, Carter's insurance policy was about to pay out. "We need to operate," Webb said, "within 48 hours. If that bullet shifts any further, you'll die." And whatever's wrapped in that gauze, we need to know what it is. Dr. Webb pulled up additional scans, his finger tracing the bright white fragment on the screen. The bullet is AK-47 caliber, encased in calcified scar tissue. Your body has been building a protective capsule around it for decades, but recent inflammation, possibly triggered by stress, caused the tissue to break down. The fragment has shifted position. How close is it? Dorothy's voice was steady, but her knuckles were white. 2 millimeters from the aortic arch. If it punctures that artery, Mr. Thornton would have minutes, maybe less. Webb turned to Bill. But there's the second concern. This fabric material. It appears to be standard military gauze from the era. The placement suggests it was deliberately left during field surgery. Deliberately? Dorothy looked between the two men. Ma'am, in combat medicine, sometimes foreign objects are left in place if removal is too risky. But this, Webb zoomed in further. There's something wrapped inside the gauze. Small, rectangular. It's been there as long as the bullet. Bill's face had gone gray. His hand trembled slightly as he touched his chest. Mr. Thornton, I need to ask, do you know what this object might be? The question hung in the air. Bill opened his mouth, closed it. Finally, can I speak to you alone, Doctor? Dorothy stood immediately, hurt flashing across her face, but she walked out without protest. 46 years had taught her when to push and when to wait. When the door closed, Bill's shoulders sagged. I knew about the bullet. Didn't know it could move. Didn't know about the fabric. How did this happen? Vietnam, August 1969. Bill's voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of someone reciting facts to avoid feeling them. I was shot. Field medic patched me up. They evacuated me before anyone reopened the wound. Stateside doctors saw the bullet on X-ray, but it was stable. They left it. And the fabric? The object inside? Bill met Webb's eyes. I can't talk about it. Mr. Thornton, if there's something in there that could complicate surgery, just take it out. All of it. Bill's voice hardened. Whatever's in there, it needs to come out. Webb studied him. 30 years of medicine had taught him when patients were hiding something. But he also recognized the look in Bill's eyes, the same look he'd seen in countless veterans who carried secrets heavier than shrapnel. The surgery is high risk. At 68 with your heart condition, I can only give you a 60% chance of survival. Without surgery, you have days, maybe a week. Bill nodded slowly. When? Tomorrow morning. First thing. Webb paused. You'll need someone to sign consent forms. Your wife or my daughter. The words seemed to cost Bill something. I need to see my daughter. Dorothy made the call from the hospital corridor, her hands shaking as she scrolled through her contacts. Rebecca answered on the 4th ring. Mom? Her voice was wary. They spoke every few weeks, careful conversations that avoided certain topics. Avoided Bill. Your father's in the hospital, VA. He needs surgery. Tomorrow. Silence, then. What kind of surgery? Something from the war. A bullet that's been inside him all these years. It's moved. They say he might not. Dorothy's voice broke. More silence. Dorothy could hear her daughter breathing, processing. Which hospital? The VA on Henderson Street. Rebecca, please. He asked for you. I'll look at his chart. See what's going on. Beck, he needs you here. Not as a doctor, as his daughter. I don't know if I can do that, Mom. Dorothy closed her eyes. He might not make it. Whatever's between you two, don't let it end like this. After she hung up, Dorothy stood in the empty corridor, surrounded by the institutional beige walls and fluorescent lights. She'd known Bill was carrying something from the war. Known it the day she met him, saw the way he flinched at sudden noises, the way he never fully relaxed. She'd thought love would be enough. 46 years, and she'd never gotten past the walls. Rebecca sat in her office at the hospital, ironically the same VA hospital, different wing, staring at her computer screen. She'd pulled up her father's chart, saw the scans, saw Webb's notes, saw the words, foreign object, unknown origin, patient refuses to elaborate. Typical. Her father, keeping secrets until they literally killed him. She thought about the last real conversation they'd had, 3 years ago, the day after Rebecca's divorce was finalized. Bill had said, "Thorntons don't quit. You're weak." She'd left his house and hadn't been back since. Her phone buzzed. A text from her colleague, Dr. Nina Patel. "Heard about your dad. You okay?" Rebecca typed back, "Don't know yet." Nina's response came immediately. "When did you last tell him you love him?" Rebecca stared at the question. Tried to remember. Couldn't. She closed the chart and grabbed her coat. Bill lay alone in the pre-op room as midnight approached. Dorothy had gone home to rest, he'd insisted. The machines beeped their steady rhythm, monitoring a heart that had beaten for 68 years despite carrying death against its wall. He couldn't sleep, kept seeing fragments of that night in August. The argument, Hayes's face, red with rage. The words, "You're refusing a direct order, Private?" The muzzle flash, the pain like a hammer to his spine, and then Carter, James Carter with his gentle hands and Georgia accent, dragging Bill into a foxhole, working by flashlight while mortars fell around them, doing something to the wound that hurt worse than the bullet. Carter's voice, "Stay quiet. This is insurance, soldier. You'll understand later." Bill had understood, later when he was stateside and Carter was still in country. Understood when word came that Carter had died 3 months later. Understood when he saw Lot Hayes receive a Bronze Star for leadership under fire. The truth had been inside Bill's body for 45 years. Proof. Evidence. The thing Carter had hidden there during that field surgery, proof that Hayes had shot his own man, proof of an illegal order, proof that a good man had died protecting a secret. And Bill had been too afraid to speak. At 3 a.m., Bill called the nurse, asked for paper and pen, spent the next hour writing. His handwriting was shaky, words crossed out and rewritten, but he got it down, everything. The letter was addressed to Dorothy and Rebecca. He sealed it and gave it to the night nurse. "If I don't make it, make sure they get this." At dawn, Dorothy returned. She'd barely slept, her eyes showed it, but she'd brought cornbread wrapped in foil, still warm. The nurse pretended not to notice as Bill ate it, crumbs falling on the hospital blanket. Dorothy pulled out her phone, played Sam Cooke's "You Send Me" softly. The orderlies would be coming soon. This might be the last moment they had. 46 years, Bill," Dorothy whispered. "I need 46 more." Bill took her hand, ran his thumb over her wedding ring, the simple gold band he'd bought with his first paycheck after coming home. "I'm sorry I couldn't give you the man you deserved." "You gave me the man I chose. That's always been enough." They sat in silence as the song played. No more words needed. Meanwhile, Rebecca drove to her parents' apartment. She had a key, had always had a key, even through the estrangement. The living room was exactly as she remembered. Wedding photo, her childhood picture. No pictures of Vietnam. Dorothy had mentioned a metal box. War papers, she'd called it. Bill kept it locked in the bedroom closet. Rebecca stood in front of the closet, hand on the door. This was a violation of privacy. But her father might die today, and she still didn't understand who he really was. The box was old military issue, olive green, lock rusted. Rebecca used bolt cutters from the garage. The lock snapped. Inside, photographs of young men in uniform, a Purple Heart medal that Bill had never displayed, official-looking papers, and a letter, not the one from the night nurse, but an older one, yellowed paper, creased from being folded and unfolded many times. Rebecca read it standing there in her father's closet. Read about an order to fire on civilians, about a refusal, about friendly fire and a cover-up, about a medic named James Carter who saved Bill's life and hid evidence in his body. She read it twice. Then she sat down on the floor, still holding the letter, and understood. Her father's silence hadn't been strength or stoicism or emotional distance. It had been shame. The operating room was cold and bright, every surface gleaming steel. Bill lay on the table, already sedated but not yet under. Dr. Webb stood at the sink, scrubbing his hands with methodical precision. Two surgical nurses prepared the instrument trays. The anesthesiologist adjusted dials and checked monitors. In the observation gallery above, Rebecca stood alone behind thick glass. Wearing scrubs despite not being on the surgical team, Webb had allowed it, an unusual courtesy. She pressed her palms against the glass, watching them position her father's body, drape sterile sheets, paint his chest with iodine. Down the hall, Dorothy sat in the surgical waiting room. Beside her, unexpectedly, was Harold Morrison. He'd returned after hearing about the surgery from another veteran in the waiting room network. Now he sat quietly, his cane between his knees, waiting with her. "Bill's tougher than he looks," Hal said. Dorothy didn't answer. She was holding rosary beads that had belonged to Bill's mother. Dorothy wasn't Catholic, but she needed something to anchor her hands. "Ma'am, I don't know what Bill told you about Vietnam." Hal's voice was careful. "But whatever they find in there, it's been eating at him for 45 years. Maybe this surgery does more than save his life. Maybe it finally lets him put it down." In the OR, the anesthesiologist placed the mask over Bill's face. "Count backward from 10, Mr. Thornton." Bill's eyes found Rebecca in the gallery above. Their gazes locked for one moment. Then, 10, 9, 8... He was gone. Webb made the first incision, following the old scar tissue. The knife parted skin, then muscle, revealing the landscape of Bill's chest cavity. Decades of healing had created a maze, scar tissue thick and calcified, wrapped around the bullet fragment like a pearl around sand. "Suction," Webb said. Blood pooled in the cavity. A nurse cleared it. "There. See it?" The bullet fragment gleamed dully under the surgical lights. It was embedded in fibrous tissue, and beneath it, wrapped around the base, was the gauze, yellowed with age, but surprisingly intact. "How close is it to the aorta?" the surgical nurse asked. "Too close." Webb's voice was tight. "If I shift this wrong, we'll have arterial bleeding we can't control. I need absolute precision." He positioned the forceps, feeling for the bullet's edges. The metal was slick, encased in calcified tissue that had to be carefully scraped away. Rebecca watched from above, her medical training warring with her terror. She could see how precarious this was. One slip, and her father would bleed out in seconds. Webb worked in silence. Minutes stretched. The room held its collective breath. "Got it." Webb slowly withdrew the forceps. The bullet fragment came free, trailing tissue. He held it up to the light, misshapen metal, 2.5 centimeters of death that had lived inside Bill for 45 years. A nurse took it, placed it in a specimen container. "Now the gauze," Webb said, but as he reached for the fabric, his hand brushed against something. The monitor shrieked. "Bleeding! Jesus, I nicked the aorta!" Blood fountained into the chest cavity. The surgical nurse grabbed suction, but it couldn't keep up. Webb's hands moved with desperate speed, applying pressure, calling for clamps. And then the worst sound in any operating room, the flat tone of a heart monitor gone silent. "Cardiac arrest!" the anesthesiologist shouted. Rebecca's hands hit the glass. "Dad!" Below, the surgical nurse was already starting compressions, hands positioned over Bill's heart, pumping rhythmically. Webb grabbed the internal paddles, the ones used directly on the exposed heart. "Charging to 200. Clear!" The shock made Bill's body convulse. The monitor stayed flat. "Again. 300. Another shock. Nothing. Rebecca couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She was watching her father die, and the last words between them had been cold and clinical. 360. This is the last one." Webb's voice was strained. "Clear." The third shock hit, for 2 seconds. An eternity. Nothing happened. Then, beep, beep, beep. The monitor showed a heartbeat, weak, irregular, but there. "We have rhythm!" The anesthesiologist's relief was palpable. "BP's coming back up. 70 over 40, 80 over 50. Webb didn't celebrate. His hands were already back in the chest cavity, controlling the bleeding, suturing the tiny tear in the aorta with hands that didn't shake, despite what had just happened. "We're closing now," he said. "That gauze stays in. We're not risking this again." "But doctor," the nurse began. "I said, we're closing. He can't survive another arrest." "The gauze can wait." It took 20 minutes to close the incision, layer by careful layer. When the final suture was tied, Webb stepped back, pulled off his gloves, and for the first time looked up at the gallery where Rebecca stood. Their eyes met through the glass. He shook his head slightly, alive but barely. Dorothy was on her feet before the surgeon reached the waiting room. His scrubs were speckled with blood, his face drawn. "He's alive," Webb said immediately. But it was close. "He arrested on the table. We got him back, but his heart is very weak. The next 24 hours are critical." "Can I see him?" "Not yet. He's in recovery, still intubated. We'll move him to ICU shortly." Webb paused. "Mrs. Thornton, I removed the bullet. But there's a piece of gauze we couldn't extract. It's still inside him. The fabric itself and whatever's wrapped in it. Why couldn't you take it out?" "Because he died when we tried." "I won't risk it again until he's stronger." Dorothy sank back into her chair. Hal's hand found her shoulder, steadying her. The ICU was a dim corridor of beeping machines and hushed voices. Bill lay in the third bed, tubes running from his arms, a ventilator breathing for him. His chest rose and fell mechanically. His skin was gray, waxy. Dorothy was allowed in first. She stood beside the bed, afraid to touch him, afraid her touch might be the thing that tipped the balance. Finally, she took his hand, cold, unresponsive. "William Thornton, you listen to me," she whispered. "You've been hiding for 45 years. Time to wake up and tell the truth. Time to live." Hours passed. Bill's vitals wavered, sometimes climbing toward stability, sometimes dropping toward crisis. Nurses moved in and out, adjusting medications, checking monitors. Dorothy refused to leave. Rebecca came at midnight. She'd been scrubbing in for another surgery, maintaining the fiction that she was just another doctor in this hospital. But when she walked into the ICU and saw her father, tubes down his throat, machines breathing for him, the steady beep of his weakened heart, the professional mask cracked. She stood on the opposite side of the bed from her mother. They didn't speak. Dorothy had one of Bill's hands. Rebecca took the other. "He wrote you a letter," a nurse said quietly, appearing beside them. "Before surgery. Said if he didn't make it, to give it to his family." She held out an envelope. Rebecca took it with shaking hands. Dorothy nodded permission. Rebecca opened it. The letter was shaky handwriting, words crossed out and rewritten, but the story was clear. Vietnam, the refusal, the shooting, Carter's sacrifice. 45 years of silence. And at the end, "Beck, I couldn't tell you because I was ashamed. Ashamed I was shot by my own officer. Ashamed I stayed silent while good men were forgotten and bad men became heroes. Ashamed that I let fear make me a coward. I taught you that Thorntons don't quit, but I quit on the truth every day for 45 years. I'm sorry. For everything, Dad. Rebecca's hands trembled. The letter blurred through tears. Mom, she whispered, did you know? No. Dorothy's voice was steady despite the tears on her face. But it explains everything. They sat vigil through the night. At 4 a.m., when the ICU was at its quietest, Bill's vitals began to drop. Heart rate slowing, blood pressure falling. Dorothy leaned close to his ear. Don't you dare leave before you fix this. Rebecca found herself praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in. And then, as if hearing them through the fog of sedation and trauma, Bill's finger twitched. Just once. But it was movement. His heart rate steadied. Blood pressure climbed back toward normal. The nurse checking his vitals looked surprised. He's fighting. Your husband's a fighter, Mrs. Thornton. He always has been, Dorothy said. Just not always for the right things. But maybe, finally, that was about to change. 32 hours after surgery, Bill's eyes opened. The ICU swam into focus slowly. Fluorescent lights, white ceiling tiles, the rhythmic beep of monitors. His throat burned where the ventilator tube had been removed hours earlier. Every breath felt like broken glass in his chest. Dorothy was there instantly, her hand finding his. You're okay. You're alive. Bill tried to speak. His voice came out as a rasp. Did they find it? Rebecca stepped into view on his other side. She was holding something, the letter he'd written. Yes, Dad. They found everything. Bill's eyes closed briefly. When they opened again, tears tracked down his temples into his gray hair. Then, you know. We need to hear it from you, Rebecca said quietly. All of it. So Bill told them what he'd never told anyone in 45 years. August 1969. His unit had been patrolling outside a village in Quang Tri Province. Lieutenant Richard Hayes, 24 years old and 3 months in country, received intelligence that the village was harboring Viet Cong. The intelligence was thin. A single report from a source Hayes refused to name. Hayes ordered the platoon to open fire on the village. Preemptive strike. Neutralize the threat. Bill was 23. He'd been in Vietnam for 8 months. Long enough to know what civilians looked like when they were just trying to survive. He'd seen women holding children, old men too frail to be soldiers. The intelligence didn't add up. I told him no. Bill's voice was barely audible. Told him we couldn't fire without confirmation. He called me a coward. Said I was putting the platoon at risk. Dorothy's hand tightened on his. The other guys, they were looking at me, waiting to see what I'd do. If I backed down, they'd fire. If I stood my ground, Bill's breath hitched. I stood my ground. Said I wouldn't shoot civilians. Hayes went red in the face, started screaming about insubordination, about court-martial. What happened? Rebecca's voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. He drew his sidearm. I thought he was trying to scare me. Then he pulled the trigger. Bill's hand moved to his chest, to the fresh bandages covering decades of secrets. Shot me in the back. I went down. Heard him yelling about sniper fire, enemy contact, making up a story while I bled in the mud. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. Outside the ICU, a cart rattled past. Normal hospital sounds that felt obscene against the weight of what Bill was saying. Carter pulled me into a foxhole. James Carter, combat medic from Georgia. 22 years old. He saw what happened. Saw Hayes shoot me. Bill's voice cracked. Carter worked on me for 2 hours while mortars fell. Told me the bullet was too close to my spine to remove safely. But he did something else. Something I didn't understand until later. The paper, Rebecca said. Bill nodded. Hayes had written the order down. Official. Carter had made a photocopy before Hayes could destroy it. During the field surgery, Carter wrapped that photocopy in waterproof plastic and gauze. Put it inside me before he closed the wound. Why? Dorothy asked. Insurance. He told me, if I don't make it, you'll have proof inside you. When you're safe, when the time is right, tell the truth. Bill's chest heaved with something between a sob and a cough. I was evacuated the next day, sent to a field hospital, then stateside. No one reopened the wound. They saw the bullet on X-ray, called it stable, left it alone. And Carter? Stayed in Vietnam. Died 3 months later in an ambush. Bill's face twisted. Hayes reported it as heroic. Said Carter died saving the platoon from enemy fire. Hayes got a Bronze Star for leadership. I got a Purple Heart based on a lie, wounded by enemy fire, the report said. The truth had its own gravity. It pulled them all into its orbit, made the air in the room feel thinner. Why didn't you tell anyone? Rebecca's question wasn't accusatory, just broken. I tried. Bill's eyes found the ceiling, unable to meet theirs. When I got stateside, I went to my commanding officer. Told him Hayes had shot me. He looked at my medical report. Enemy fire. Looked at Hayes's commendation. Asked if I had proof. I didn't. Not that I could access. The evidence was buried in my own body. They didn't believe you. Worse, they suggested I was suffering from combat stress, PTSD. Suggested I see a psychiatrist. Made it clear that if I pushed the accusation without proof, I'd be the one facing charges. Insubordination, false accusations against a superior officer, possible dishonorable discharge. The machines beeped. Bill's heart rate was climbing. The monitors showed his agitation. So I buried it, Bill whispered. Got married. Had you, Beck. Got a job. Lived my life. Watched Hayes climb the ranks, get promoted, eventually go into politics. Every year I told myself I'd speak up. Every year fear stopped me. You let him become a senator, Rebecca said. Not cruel, just factual. I let Carter die for nothing. Bill's voice broke completely. That's what I couldn't live with. He gave his life to protect that evidence, and I was too goddamn afraid to use it. Dorothy was crying silently, her hand still gripping Bill's. Why couldn't you tell me I'm your wife? Because if I told you, you'd know what I really was. A coward. A man who chose safety over justice, over honor, over Carter's sacrifice. Bill finally looked at her. I couldn't bear for you to know. So I built walls, kept you out, kept Beck out. Became the strong, silent type because silence was the only thing keeping the shame from destroying me. The bullet moving, Rebecca said slowly, understanding. Your body was trying to force this out. Bill nodded. 45 years, it sat there, quiet. Then it shifted, started moving, like Carter was telling me time was up, like my own body was rejecting the lie. The three of them sat in silence. Outside, the sun was rising. Bill could see light creeping around the edges of the window blinds. A new day, but carrying the full weight of the old one. What do we do now? Dorothy finally asked. Bill closed his eyes. I don't know. Hayes is old, probably dying. Carter's dead. and I'm just a broken old man who waited 45 years too long to speak. But the evidence was still there, still wrapped around his heart, still waiting. 3 days after Bill's confession, Dr. Webb stood at his bedside reviewing charts. Bill's vitals had stabilized enough for the conversation they'd been avoiding. "The gauze is still inside you," Webb said. "With the paper. We need to remove it. The fabric is causing low-grade infection. But after what happened during the first surgery, I won't attempt it unless you're significantly stronger." "How long?" Bill asked. "Another week, maybe 2. Your heart needs time to heal before we risk opening you again." Rebecca, who'd been present for the consultation, spoke up. "What if we left it? Would the infection kill him?" Webb considered. "Eventually, yes, but we have time. Not months, but weeks." After Webb left, Rebecca pulled a chair close to Bill's bed. "Dad, I've been thinking about this. About what to do with the evidence once they remove it." Bill's jaw tightened. "There's nothing to do. Hayes is an old man. Carter's dead. It's too late for justice." "Is it?" Rebecca pulled out her phone, showed him a screen. "I did some research. Senator Richard Hayes, retired, last public appearance 6 months ago. But there's something else." She scrolled to another article. "He's been trying to contact you for years." Bill's heart monitor spiked. "What?" "Letters. Sent to your parents' old address. The house was sold in 2005, but mail was forwarded for a while. Then the forwarding expired. The letters were returned to sender, but Hayes kept trying. The VA has your current information, but there was never a connection made." Rebecca pulled up images of envelope scans from a public records request. The most recent letter was 2 months ago. To William Thornton, Private First Class, U.S. Army. He included a phone number. Dorothy, who'd been listening silently, spoke. "He wants to talk to you." "After 45 years?" Bill's voice was bitter. What could he possibly have to say? Rebecca showed him another article. "He's in a memory care facility, early-stage dementia. According to this interview with his daughter, he's been having episodes, talking about the war, saying he needs to make things right before he dies." Bill stared at the phone number on the screen, a Nashville area code. 7 digits that connected him to the man who'd shot him, covered it up, built a career on lies while Carter rotted in an unmarked grave and Bill carried the secret like a tumor. "I can't talk to him," Bill whispered. "Why not?" Dorothy's voice was gentle but firm. "After everything, don't you want to hear what he has to say?" "I know what he'll say. Sorry. Regrets. None of it changes anything." "Maybe not," Rebecca said. "But Dad, you've been carrying this alone for 45 years. Maybe it's time to share the weight, even with him." Bill closed his eyes. The beeping machines marked time, seconds, heartbeats, moments of a life that had almost ended on a surgical table because he'd been too afraid to speak. "Dial the number," he said finally. Rebecca's hand shook slightly as she dialed. She put the phone on speaker and held it near Bill's face. It rang 4 times. Then a voice, thin and uncertain. "Hello? Senator Hayes?" Bill's voice was hoarse. A long pause. "Who is this?" "William Thornton. Bill Thornton. You've been trying to reach me." The sound on the other end might have been a gasp or a sob. "Thornton, Jesus Christ, is this real? Are you real?" "I'm real. I thought—" Hayes' voice broke. "I thought you died. After everything. I thought you died and I killed you and—" He was crying now, unmistakable. An old man weeping into a phone, Bill's throat constricted. 45 years of imagining this moment, and he'd never imagined tears. "I didn't die," Bill said flatly. "Carter saved me." "James Carter, the medic. You remember him?" "Every day." Hayes's voice was thick. "Every single day for 45 years. He died 3 months after you shot me. Did you know that? I know. I was there. I watched him bleed out in the mud. Hayes was barely coherent now. I wrote the report, made him a hero, because he was better than all of us. Bill felt Dorothy's hand on his arm, anchoring him. You shot me for refusing to fire on civilians. I was terrified, Hayes said. 24 years old, 3 months in that hellhole. The intelligence said they were VC. I believed it. I needed to believe it. And when you refused, I thought you'd get us all killed. They were civilians. I know. God, I know. We searched the village after. Found nothing. No weapons. No supplies. Just people. Hayes's breathing was ragged. I've seen their faces every night for 45 years. The people we would have killed if you hadn't stopped me. Bill hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected Hayes to admit it so readily, so completely. You built a career on lies. Bronze Star. Senator. War hero. Built on your blood and Carter's death, Hayes said. I tried to be good. Tried to do right by veterans, by soldiers. Thought maybe I could make up for it. But you can't, can you? Can't balance the scales. No, Bill said quietly. You can't. I'm dying, Hayes said. Dementia. Some days I don't know where I am, but I always remember you. Always remember the shot. The way you looked at me before you fell. The way Carter looked at me after. Why are you calling me? Because I need you to know I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything. Doesn't give you back the years. Doesn't bring Carter back. But I need to say it before I lose even the memory of what I did. I'm sorry, Thornton. I'm so goddamn sorry. Bill's face was wet. He hadn't noticed when he started crying. Dorothy was crying. Even Rebecca had tears streaming down her face. Carter hid something inside me, Bill said. During the field surgery, evidence. A copy of your order. Proof of what really happened. Hayes went very quiet. Then, he was smart. Smarter than all of us. I'm having surgery in 2 weeks to remove it. Once it's out, I could... Bill stopped. Could what? Expose Hayes? Destroy a dying old man? For what purpose? You should, Hayes said. Use it. Tell the truth. Carter deserves that. You deserve that. You'd lose everything. Your reputation. Your legacy. I should. Hayes' voice was firm despite the tears. But Thornton, can we do something else first? Can we honor Carter together? Get him recognized properly? I still have contacts, military connections. We could push for a posthumous medal. Bronze Star, Silver Star, something real. Bill looked at Dorothy, at Rebecca. Both nodded. How? Bill asked. Write it all down. What happened that night. What Carter did. I'll countersign it. Corroborate. My name still carries weight. We can get him honored without... Hayes paused. Without the full story. Without destroying either of us. You mean without exposing you shot me? I mean without the media circus. The he said, she said, the lawyers. Just 2 old soldiers telling the truth about a medic who saved a life when he should have let a coward die. Bill closed his eyes. It wasn't full justice. Hayes would still escape consequences, but Carter would be honored. That was something. That was more than 45 years of silence had achieved. I'll think about it, Bill said. Thank you. Hayes' voice was breaking again. And Thornton, I don't expect forgiveness, don't deserve it, but thank you for being the man you were that day, for standing up, for being right when I was wrong. You saved lives. I need you to know that. Bill hung up without saying goodbye. The hospital room was silent except for the monitors. Finally, Dorothy spoke. What are you going to do? I don't know, Bill admitted. Part of me wants to burn it all down, expose him, make him pay. And the other part? Rebecca asked. The other part just wants Carter to be remembered. Wants his family to know he died a hero. Wants— Bill's voice caught. Wants to stop carrying this. A knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in. Mr. Thornton, you have a visitor? Mrs. Agnes Murphy? She says she's your neighbor. Bill and Dorothy exchanged confused glances. Rebecca nodded to the nurse. Send her in. Mrs. Murphy entered hesitantly, holding a small gift bag. She looked older than her 60 years, her face lined with grief that had settled into permanent features. Mr. Thornton, I owe you an apology. She didn't sit, just stood at the foot of the bed. I heard about your surgery, about what happened to you in Vietnam. And her voice broke. My son Daniel died in Iraq, 2007. He was a medic, 22 years old. Dorothy stood, offered her chair. Mrs. Murphy sat, clutching the gift bag. When I heard you screaming that night when I called the police, I wasn't thinking of you as a veteran, as someone who served. I was thinking about all the veterans who came home when my son didn't. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. But I was angry at the wrong people. She reached into the bag, pulled out a photograph. A young man in desert camouflage, smiling. This is Daniel. He saved 3 soldiers before the IED hit. They gave him a Silver Star posthumously. But I couldn't. I couldn't be proud. I could only be angry that he's dead and others lived. Bill took the photo with shaking hands, looked at the young face, so much like Carter's in his own faded memories. He was brave. So was James Carter, Mrs. Murphy said. I read about him. What he did for you. What you're trying to do for him. She wiped her eyes. I want to help. However I can. My son and your medic, they're connected. They both gave their lives for others. I want Daniel honored with Carter. I want people to remember all the medics, all the ones who ran toward danger instead of away from it. And there it was. The reversal Bill hadn't seen coming. The enemy neighbor who'd called the police was another mother carrying the same weight, the same grief, the same need for meaning in senseless loss. Yes, Bill said. We'll honor them together. 6 weeks after the phone call with Hayes, Bill underwent his second surgery. This time, there were no complications. Dr. Webb carefully extracted the gauze and the plastic-wrapped paper that had lived against Bill's heart for 45 years. When Bill woke in recovery, Dorothy was there holding a small plastic container. Inside, a yellowed piece of paper, still legible after decades. Carter's insurance policy, Bill whispered, touching the container through the plastic. The paper confirmed everything. Hayes' signed order to fire on unconfirmed targets. Carter's handwritten note documenting the shooting, dated August 15, 1969. Physical proof that had survived inside Bill's body longer than some marriages, some careers, some lives. What do we do with it? Dorothy asked. Bill had thought about nothing else for 6 weeks. We honor Carter, but we don't destroy Hayes. He's a dying old man who's been dying inside for 45 years, same as me. We've both served our sentences. Rebecca had been working behind the scenes with Hayes's staff and military contacts. The bureaucracy moved slowly, but it moved. Bronze Star with Valor device for Sergeant James Carter, posthumously. Ceremony to be held Memorial Day at the VA hospital. Carter's family had been located through military records. His widow, Evelyn, 85 years old, living in Georgia with her daughter. 3 children, 7 grandchildren. None of them had known the full story of how James died. Only that he'd been killed in combat, that he'd been brave, that the Army had said he died a hero. When Rebecca called Evelyn to explain, the old woman had wept. He wrote me a letter before he died. Said he'd helped a soldier, maybe saved his life. Said if he didn't make it home, at least he died doing what was right. I never knew who that soldier was. Now I do. 3 days before Memorial Day, Officer Frank Kowalski appeared at Bill's door. Bill had been home for 2 weeks, healing well, the scar on his chest still tender but no longer agonizing with every breath. Kowalski held a vest, navy blue with white lettering, VA Hospital Volunteer. "Mr. Thornton, I've been doing a lot of thinking since that night I came to your apartment about my grandfather. He served in Korea, came home broken. Family didn't know how to help him, so they didn't. He died alone in a VA hospital, and nobody came to the funeral except my grandmother." Bill remembered that kind of homecoming, the isolation, the sense that civilians couldn't understand, didn't want to understand. "I swore I'd never be like my family," Kowalski continued. "But that night, I was exactly like them. I saw a veteran in pain and assumed the worst. I'm sorry, and I want to make it right. I've been volunteering at the VA every weekend, driving vets to appointments, helping with paperwork." "It's not enough, but it's something." Bill took the vest, felt the weight of it. "It's more than enough. Thank you. Will you be at the ceremony Monday?" "Wouldn't miss it." The day before Memorial Day, Evelyn Carter arrived. Bill and Dorothy met her at the hotel, two couples who'd been shaped by the same war, the same loss, separated by 45 years of silence. Evelyn was small, elegant, her white hair carefully styled. When she saw Bill, she walked straight to him and wrapped her arms around him without a word. They stood like that for a long moment. Two people who'd loved the same hero, two people who'd survived when he hadn't. "James talked about you in his letters," Evelyn said finally, pulling back to look at Bill's face. "He didn't use your name, but he wrote about a soldier who stood up to a bad order, said that soldier had integrity, said he was worth saving." Bill's throat closed. "He gave me a second chance at life. Not just that night. He gave me the evidence I needed to speak the truth. I'm sorry it took me so long." "You're here now," Evelyn said simply. "That's what matters." Carter's children arrived, James Jr., Patricia, and Michael, all in their late 50s and early 60s. They'd brought their children, Carter's grandchildren, ranging from 8 to 25. 3 generations who'd grown up without him, but who carried pieces of his character in their faces, their gestures, their kindness. The youngest grandchild, an 8-year-old girl named Maya, approached Bill shyly. "Are you the soldier my Papa James saved?" Bill knelt down, eye level with her. "I am." "Did it hurt when you got shot?" "Maya," her mother started to protest, but Bill held up a hand. "Yes, it hurt, but your Papa James made it better. He was the bravest man I ever knew." Maya considered this. "My teacher says heroes wear capes, but Papa James wore a uniform." "The best heroes do," Bill said. Memorial Day dawned clear and warm. The VA hospital auditorium filled with over 200 people, veterans from every war, families, hospital staff, local news cameras. Mrs. Murphy sat in the 3rd row, Daniel's photo in her lap. Harold Morrison had come, leaning on his cane, sitting with other Vietnam vets who'd heard about the ceremony through the Veteran Network. Even Senator Hayes was there, wheelchair-bound, a nurse at his side. His face was gaunt, his eyes often unfocused, but when he saw Bill, recognition flared and tears followed. The ceremony began with the color guard, the national anthem. Bill stood, still healing, still in some pain, but standing because that's what you did. His hand over his heart. Dorothy on one side, Rebecca on the other. A VA official read Carter's citation, Bronze Star with Valor Device, posthumous promotion to sergeant, for extraordinary heroism in combat operations. Sergeant James Carter, under intense enemy fire, saved the life of a fellow soldier while maintaining the highest standards of medical ethics. His actions reflect great credit upon himself, the medical corps, and the United States Army. Evelyn Carter was called forward. Bill helped her to the stage, two old people moving slowly, carrying decades between them. She accepted the metal case, held it against her chest, and the auditorium rose in standing ovation. The sound washed over them, clapping that went on, veterans saluting, families crying. Then Bill did something he hadn't planned. He stepped to the microphone. "My name is William Thornton. On August 15, 1969, I refused an order I believed was wrong. My commanding officer shot me for that refusal. Sergeant James Carter saved my life. He didn't just patch my wounds, he gave me something more. He gave me the truth, and he gave me the courage eventually to speak it." Bill's voice shook but held. "For 45 years I stayed silent. I was afraid of consequences, afraid of judgment, afraid that speaking up would destroy my life. But silence was destroying me anyway. The bullet Carter left inside me, the evidence he hid there, it was his way of saying, 'When you're ready, tell the truth.' It took me 45 years to be ready." He looked at Carter's family. "Sergeant Carter died 3 months after saving me. He died a hero. He deserved to be recognized 45 years ago, and I'm sorry, I'm so deeply sorry, that my fear delayed this moment. But today we honor him. Today his family knows what he did. Today the record is corrected." Bill gestured to Mrs. Murphy. "We also honor all the medics who ran toward danger, like Specialist Daniel Murphy, who died saving 3 soldiers in Iraq, like all the corpsmen and medics who put others first. They are the best of us." The applause came again, but softer now, reverent. Bill stepped back from the microphone and Evelyn took his hand. The ceremony continued with prayers, songs, remembrances, but the moment that broke everyone was when Bill asked Carter's grandchildren to join him on stage. He held out the plastic container with the bullet fragment inside. "This belonged to your grandfather. He kept it safe inside me for 45 years. Now it's yours. A reminder that truth survives, even buried deep, even when it takes decades to surface." Young Maya took the container carefully, looking at the misshapen metal. "It's small," she said. "Small things can carry big truths," Bill told her. After the ceremony, in the crowded reception hall, Hayes's wheelchair approached Bill. They hadn't spoken face to face in 45 years. Hayes looked up, his face ravaged by time and guilt and disease. "Thank you," Hayes whispered, "for not destroying me. For choosing Carter's honor over my punishment." Bill looked at the old man, not the lieutenant who'd shot him, not the senator who'd built a career on lies, but just another human who'd made terrible choices and lived with them. "We were kids in hell, Hayes. We both survived. Carter didn't. Today was for him." Hayes nodded, tears on his cheeks. "I'll die with this, with what I did." "So will I," Bill said. But today Carter lives. The video of Bill's speech went viral within hours. #ComeHome. Veteran began trending. Thousands of veterans shared their own stories of delayed healing, of secrets carried, of the courage it took to finally speak. The VA reported a 300% increase in calls to their PTSD hotline. CBS News ran a feature. By week's end, 5,000 veterans had enrolled in counseling programs inspired by Bill's story. 6 months later, on Veterans Day, Bill stood at Arlington National Cemetery. Not at Carter's actual grave, his body had never been recovered, but at a memorial marker that now bore his name, rank, and the dates of his too short life. The marker also listed his Bronze Star. Beside Bill stood Dorothy, her hand in his, Rebecca on his other side. The scar on Bill's chest had faded to a thin line, barely visible. But it was there, a reminder. "I kept my promise, Sergeant," Bill whispered to the stone. "Took me too long, but I kept it." The wind carried his words away across the thousands of white markers, each one a story, many still untold. Rebecca squeezed his hand. "Dad, I have news. I'm fostering a child, a little boy, 8 years old. His father died in Afghanistan." Bill turned to her, and for the first time in years, maybe ever, his smile was unguarded. "I'd like to meet him. Maybe I can be a better grandfather than I was a father." "You're already better," Rebecca said. "Because now you're honest." They walked together through the cemetery, 3 generations held together not by silence, but by truth finally spoken. Behind them, other families moved among the graves, each carrying their own weights, their own stories, their own long-delayed healings. The closing shot would show them from above, 3 small figures among thousands of white stones, walking slowly toward the parking lot. The American flag rippled in the wind. Sam Cooke's "You Send Me" played softly. That same song from the USO dance 55 years ago. The song of Bill and Dorothy's beginning. On screen, final text appeared. An estimated 200,000 Vietnam veterans still carry shrapnel or bullets in their bodies. Many also carry invisible wounds that may never fully heal. In 2024, the Come Home Veteran Initiative, inspired by Bill Thornton's story, helped over 5,000 veterans access PTSD counseling and family reconciliation services. James Carter's Bronze Star now rests in the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, representing all medics who served with honor. Bill Thornton lived to age 82, surrounded by family. His last words were, "Tell them the truth. It's never too late." This story is dedicated to all veterans who carry the weight of service, seen and unseen. Welcome home. The flag waved. The music faded. The screen went dark. But the message remained. Healing is not about forgetting. It's about finally having the courage to remember and to speak. The end. For decades, Bill Thornton carried a secret that almost killed him. Not just the bullet in his chest, but the weight of words left unspoken. His story reminds us that the heaviest burdens aren't always visible, and the bravest battles aren't always fought with weapons. They're fought in hospital rooms, at kitchen tables, in quiet moments when we finally find the courage to say what we've been holding back. How many of us carry our own bullets, regrets, unspoken truths, broken relationships we tell ourselves are too far gone to fix? Bill waited 45 years to speak his truth. And when he finally did, it didn't just save his life. It healed his family, honored a fallen hero, and inspired thousands of others to come home to themselves. The remarkable thing about healing is that it doesn't have an expiration date. It's never too late to be honest, to reconcile, to finally put down what you've been carrying alone. What burden have you been carrying that you're finally ready to release? Is there someone in your life you need to have an honest conversation with before time runs out? Share your thoughts below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.